Lil Ern here.
Kaine right here.
And we've got Boy Suck here, so but before I get into this, I've got to finish this. Finish this thought out, and I just want to be clear about this immigration thing. And anybody can have an opinion about this thing, but what the law says is what the law says. So you can't begin arguing. You have to know what it says,
Absolutely.
And then you can still have your opinion. And what I was pointing out is right now, as anybody who's ever been pulled over, arrested, or what have you, the first thing the officer says is, I need your insurance and your ID.
Right.
So you're already proving your citizenship. And this isn't in just Arizona. This is wherever you live.
Absolutely.
Wherever you live right now, the minute that you are under, not even arrest, but when they even just question you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. When you're detained for a reasonable suspicion of you doing something wrong, you at that point in time have to show your ID and prove your identity.
Right.
And people are getting deported at this point in time. You know what I'm saying? If they find out you commit a crime, I've seen this happen. That's already going on. So when people are telling you that the only way under this legislation in Arizona that you can be questioned about your citizenship is if you're already committing another crime, that's not correct.
Not true.
That is not correct. That's why this has become such a big issue.
Right.
The way that this legislation is written is that they are now required, if they have a reasonable suspicion to think you're an illegal alien, to ask you to prove your identity.
Right.
It has nothing to do with a crime. You can be walking somewhere. You don't have to be speeding. You don't have to be breaking into a window. As law enforcement are the people who enforce the laws, they will be required to ask anybody who they have reasonable suspicion of being an illegal to prove that they are in fact legal or illegal.
Right.
And that's why this is becoming such a problem, because what defines reasonable suspicion?
The determination
What
is at
determines
the discretion of the individual, the officer.
Exactly.
Right.
Law enforcement, many people are not for this. In fact, we were going back on this Facebook battle, and there were a lot of different opinions on here. And, a lot of these people were actually former classmates of mine.
Okay.
So we're having this lively discussion, one of which who lives in Arizona, and her husband is actually an Arizona police officer.
Sure.
And she had even stated, and I would think, what better person to, get an opinion from than somebody who is the spouse of a police officer out in Arizona. And she made...
That's better than the horse's mouth.
Exactly. It's better than me interpreting stuff and the person who posted this interpreting stuff. This is somebody who's been in the rooms in the police department discussing this with their bosses. And she had even said, I'm going to pull this up, and I normally don't bring my phone in here, but I just wanted to tonight.
I was wondering about that.
She says, I have lived in Arizona for 10 years, and my husband is Phoenix PD. He has zero interest in walking around looking for people with brown skin to deport. As a police officer, you have to have reasonable suspicion that the person is here illegally, and that is the problem. No one has to find what reasonable suspicion of being here illegally is, only that it cannot be based solely on skin color. Not being able to speak a lick of English, possibly. There is a lot to figure out, but I know many police officers here. They are not a bunch of white guys with billy clubs beating down Mexicans. They are of different backgrounds, ethnicities, gender, sexual orientation, and political beliefs. The stereotypes of our police and the residents in this state are sickening, especially considering that many of the loudest people have never even set foot in Arizona. Ridiculous. I think that she brings up a great point. First of all, just one more time, under this new legislation, you do not have to be committing any other crime whatsoever to have to prove what your legal status is. That is incorrect. I'm sorry for anybody on this Facebook feed who thinks that. You're incorrect. You are systematically and patently wrong. Somebody else from Arizona had chimed in on this and basically, supported me that it was going to be racial profiling.
Absolutely.
And it can't be racial profiling because we live in New York City. Half of the people here that are illegals look, white as day, if that's what you want to go on.
Yeah. I'd even heard that there was some case where people had started to look at the quote-unquote tennis shoes of the person in question. Because, of course, if you're in an urban neighborhood or if you're in a low-income neighborhood, you have a certain type of shoe, or we've seen, quote-unquote, gang members with these types of shoes on. So it's like you said, you don't have to be doing anything illegal. You could just be walking down the street, and the police officer, it's at their discretion to determine what that reasonable suspicion is.
Right, and exactly, and you can come to a different opinion about the legislation than I do. Even people support this legislation knowing that you can be questioned without a crime. I'm just saying, if you're going to engage in an argument, then you at least have to put the facts out there. And the fact of the matter is that you do not have to be committing a crime to be questioned about your legal status with this legislation. And you might still support the legislation, and that's okay. But you can't say that
you make things up.
Exactly, because that's not what the legislation says. Right. That is not what it says. Consult an attorney. It's very, very clear. If that were the case, there would be no reason for this legislation, because you already have to prove your identity when you're arrested in any jurisdiction in this country as it is. There would be no need for Arizona Senate Bill 1070 if the only way that you can ask is if you're already committing a crime. That already goes on. There would be no reason for this. We wouldn't be having this debate. That's why we're having this debate. That's why we're having it. Yeah. So that's that. Moving right along, and you know what, I do appreciate, these Facebook little things. It's fun, you can have these little debates. It was like being in high school again.